Hi, I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Larissa.
And we're creatives coming alongside you to learn and grow on our journey to success.
And this is Broke at the Oscars. Yay!
Broke at the Oscars. That
We're back
is
again.
what this is. This is. Indeed.
And we're back again doing remote videoing.
Yeah,
I feel
again, remote. Yep.
we just started this video thing and then we're just like, okay, we're leaving now.
We're just like traveling the country apparently now. Yeah. Yeah, I decided to go home, visit my family. So we are in different states again, but modern technology, we can still record. So
We love Zoom.
pretty great. Yeah. Hashtag not sponsored.
Also, we have a guest.
We have a
you
guest.
were just going to say that, weren't you?
I was just going to say that.
Look at us.
Great minds. You're so in sync. We're more in sync than Justin Timberlake.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Okay. All right. Connor, welcome.
Hi, Conner.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Could you just briefly introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do in film?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Conner Savoca. I am a film composer. I've been doing that for 5 to 6 years now. And worked on a number of short films, done a feature film. I also do radio drama, do a lot of that these days,
nice.
Which is a ton of fun as well. And yeah, I mean, that's, done it for a long time, and it's a great, I love the process of kind of bringing film or the story, whatever it is, to life through music. It's really it's a very fulfilling role to play in the film. So worked with a lot of great directors and producers, and it's been great. I really enjoy that part of it.
Nice.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And did you do music and then fall into film, or did you do film first and then fall into music, or did they both happen at the same time? Like, how did that happen?
I have done a lot. I've done, like, my whole life. I've been interested in film and radio and production, and so I've done a lot of things. I've done some. I mean, I haven't really done any, like, shot any movies that I released to the public. More like just for fun. I've always been interested in recording, especially like recording audio. It was kind of a fun thing to do. I did a lot of audio editing and video editing and all that before I got into music. Some just for fun and some for clients. And then I kind of just got interested in it. So it's not something I've always been, like, scoring films was not something I was always interested in doing. I just kind of fell into it one day, and I've played instruments growing up. I've played piano and some acoustic instruments, so I do have a musical background. But I started like, because I do it digitally. I don't use live orchestras. I use live instruments from time to time. It was just something I kind of figured out over time, and started building a studio, and I kind of got interested in it, and I started discovering the power of music in a film, and I thought it was so cool that this one guy has the ability to write music that makes you feel things that you would not feel in a film or a story without it. And that just really, really intrigued me, and I wanted to learn how to do that. And because of the technology that we have nowadays, it's become much easier for just anybody who wants to do it to get into it. And it's not really all that expensive. I mean, you don't have to have a degree in music theory and a full orchestra to make music and make good music these days. So that fascinated me too, and I kind of just started studying it in that way. And I would consider myself completely self-taught. I don't have any formal music education of any kind. And so at that point I just started pursuing directors and producers, and I started getting involved in film festivals and trying to break into the world of filmmaking and try and get my name out there. And it kind of happened all at once. Like I did write some music before I started doing film scoring, but I kind of my training wheels were kind of scoring films. So my training and my experience in film scoring kind of started at the same time.
I love how you just say that you just like kind of like fell into it, because I feel like a lot of the people we talk to, it's kind of like they were pursuing something and then they just kind of realize this is what they like. It's a blessing when right at the get-go, I'm pursuing this one thing. But it's really also very, very cool how you can be like taking a path and then it's like, oh, here it is. And then it's like, it like blossoms and like becomes part of the journey. It's really, really cool that happens.
Exactly. Yeah. I was in the right area. I was in the field.
Yeah.
And it just sort of became an interest one day. I don't even know how exactly.
Yeah.
It just sort of happened.
And what you said about like formal training, because that's kind of a question I was like going to ask as you were talking, was like you said you don't really have a formal music background, because I was wondering, it's like, so people start out taking music because everybody's supposed to take piano lessons. I did, and I didn't. I didn't like continue them because I like learned the wrong way. And anyways. Poor mom. Anyway, she still plays the piano, and now my littlest sister plays piano like really well now. It's kind of like, well, all right.
Hey, it's never too late to learn, though. It's never too late.
No, it's not.
Right.
And I have this guitar in my closet, and I'm like, I should just kind of bring it out and practice my chords. But like, that's cool that you can I mean, you probably need to have some sort of music knowledge. You need to have like the ear for the timing and all that. But like, is it necessary, like somebody who like kind of failed piano lessons, can they pursue this kind of a thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I did take some piano lessons, but taking piano lessons isn't really how I learned to play piano. I just sat down and started playing.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to develop keyboard skills and all that. But because I grew up, I started playing banjo and guitar when I was about 6 years old. And I'd learned those by ear, learned how to play songs on them by ear. And that, to me, that really helped me develop my, just ear for music in my head. I have an understanding of theory, in like music theory in my head that helps me when it comes to writing music, and that was developed by just learning to play instruments. So I think either way, you can get formal music education, you can go take theory classes, and that is great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And I almost wish I had a little bit more education in that area. I'm sure it would help me write better music, to understand theory even better. But to get started, no. I mean, if you have any inclination at all, if you can carry a tune, or even if you can't, I think you can learn. And those things are things you can learn on your own. I mean, if you have an instrument, a piano, if you have access to one, if you sing, I mean, if you're able to carry a tune in the least, this is something you could totally get into, and it'll take time to learn and to get better at it. But in some ways, you don't have to. I like to say you don't have to go to college at all to learn this and a lot of things. You tend to learn better by actually doing it.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So to get into the like nitty gritty a little bit, because you said you do a lot of digital instruments, what software do you use, or like, and also what would you recommend for someone who is just starting out?
Yeah, so I use Apple Logic because I'm a big Mac guy. I don't use anything else. PCs, they're fine, but they're kind of like they're second tier, lower class in my view. And for most Mac users, but I like Macs because I just think that they're built better. especially for creative work. I don't think there's much dispute about that. And then Logic, is Apple's program. So they've developed it to work with their computers, and I think it works. I mean, most any digital audio workstations or DAWs in our world is what we call them. Work on any platform. Logic doesn't work on PCs because it's exclusively an Apple program, but most DAWs do work on either platform. So they all do the same thing. They all perform the same functions. Their interfaces are built differently, but they all basically do the same thing. Logic is just my program of choice. I like it because I think it's a great program. I love the interface. It's a deep program, and it gets the job done, but it's fun to use. And I don't, I rarely have issues with it, and I just like how it looks. It's very sleek, and it's very powerful at the same time.
Nice.
Like an Arabian.
That's what I would recommend if you can. Like if you can start with Logic, go for it. If not, the rest of them they're just as good. It's really what you're comfortable with.
It is the logical choice.
Oh, wow.
It is the logical choice.
Think about it. Yeah.
And price-wise, it's actually if you own a Mac, it's really it's only like I think it's down to like $200 now, $200-$300. It's really
nice.
not. I mean, compared to some of the other programs, it's a great price as well.
Yeah.
It really is crazy. I mean, the age that we live in, all that stuff is so accessible. It's really crazy.
It is.
And I mean, even like apps nowadays, they're like you can do stuff on your phone too, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now the technology, especially in the last 5-6 years, has advanced to the point where I can access all of my files. Like if I wanted to listen to my music that I wrote yesterday on the go, I could, I mix it out. I save it to my computer. I can access it from my phone. I've got it set up to where I can access it from my phone. I can show it to anybody I want to. Stuff that I wrote yesterday, I could be 1,000 miles away, and I could show somebody something I just did. Yeah. It's the technology has come so far. It's so amazing.
Johann would just roll over in his grave.
Totally. I mean, it really has. And when it comes to writing music, especially, it has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. I mean, it started kind of in the 70s and 80s, what has led to the modern music era. But I mean, yeah, you don't need a pen and a piece of paper and like there's ways to write music quickly now. Like I would not be able to write music the way it was traditionally done. A piano and sheet music and a piece of paper. It's the way I do it, and the projects I work on, I have to do it so quickly. Most of the time, I'm under a deadline. There's just no way. But at the same time, those composers of that era were so talented. I mean, Beethoven, he couldn't hear, and he could still he knew what he was writing. He knew the music he was writing, and that takes a ton of just talent that I don't have. I really don't.
Oh, I'm
Plus,
sure you
what's
do.
what's the piece of music? I can't remember who wrote it, but there's that one piece of music that actually calls for cannons to be used at some point as part of the percussion.
Is that Tchaikovsky?
I think so. That sounds familiar.
Something is 18. Oh crap! It's 18 something.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it was. But
and they're like,
that's definitely something like. I mean, digital cannons, I'm sure, would have an impact, but there's got to be something about just going to see a live orchestra and they're just firing off cannons.
That's the other thing is there's still no replacement for live orchestra, live instruments, live players. There's still something very magical about that. It's becoming easier and easier to replicate, but still there is a difference between live and digital. It's just hard to beat.
And the old soul in me is just like, no. Stop making these fake musics. Make real instruments. But I mean, money and like accessibility and all that. It's very, very cool where we can go in such limited arrangements. But yet, like using these tools properly, you can, go anywhere.
You really can, yeah.
You mentioned deadlines, and I think we wanted to veer into like the process of filmmaking and like, you know, when you're brought onto a film. So I don't know if you can walk us through, like, if you're part of the pre-production process of filmmaking, when are you brought on? Who are you talking to? Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, it really depends on who you're working with. I would love it if I could be involved from the very beginning, because that just gives me more time to think about it in my head and figure out what I want to do musically, and just be involved and see it coming together. Does help me. I don't get that opportunity very often. Most often what happens, and I've had a number of different experiences, but usually it's they call me and they have a locked cut ready to go, and they're like, can you do it, and can you do it in X amount of time?
Oh, wow.
And sometimes I can, and sometimes I'm like, well, I can try, like no guarantees, but you know, we'll do our best. So that's typically what happens more often. If I could be brought on maybe even midway through the process, just so I have a heads up of what's coming, and I know what the story is and all that, that's helpful for me. But you know, we have to adapt.
So Conner, going into production and specifically pre-production, when are you usually brought on a project? Who are you mainly talking to? And is it early enough? Do you rely heavily on the script, or are you coming straight into like a locked edit, or like how does that generally work for you?
Yeah, again, it really depends on who I'm working with, but sometimes I will get a script and I'll get to read ahead with that. Sometimes, depending on the project, I don't like to go too far ahead. I don't like to know what's coming.
Yeah.
Because that will, if I, as the composer, who am kind of setting the tone for the movie, if I don't know what's coming, I tend to work that a little bit better into the music and kind of add that anticipation to the music that may not be there if I knew exactly what was coming.
Interesting.
I tend to do that a little bit more in radio drama because it's easier to. In film, I kind of need to know a little bit farther ahead what's coming, so I know how to build themes.
Yeah.
And tie everything together a little bit better. But sometimes I don't. So if I get a script, I might not, and unless the director wants me to know. Like if they give me the script and say, okay, I want you to read this and let me know what you think, then I will. But I try and ask for a script as early as possible, and then yeah, I'll get, and sometimes I don't get it. I just get a locked cut of the film, and they say, can you do this, and how quickly can you do it? And we talk it through and work it out. And then I go right to work. So it depends on how much time I have, and sometimes it's not very much. Sometimes if I'm involved a little bit earlier, I have a little bit more time, and I think that the score will tend to come out a little bit better if I am involved a little bit earlier.
I feel like that's a general rule. That's just, if you're involved a little earlier, it's usually good. It's usually better.
Typically,
the more time you have to prepare.
Yeah.
Usually.
Exactly. Sometimes, I mean, if I'm under a deadline and I know I have to get it done, like it's got to be done by this date.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's almost better. It depends on the project. Like if creativity's flowing well, and I'm just moving right along, I almost like deadlines because I have to get it done. And I have a certain amount of time to do it.
Typically, then, kind of like going into production, is there any part of production that you would be involved with as a composer, or are you just pretty much? I know you're mostly like working in post-production with the director, but have you ever had a director ask you for like musical cues for the actors to, you know, get in the right headspace on set or anything like that, or is it all just in post-production for you?
No, typically not. I mean, that and I don't have, 30, 40 years of experience, so that may happen at some point. I've never had that as of yet.
Yeah.
But no, I'm like, composer's like the last guy in the chain. He's it's almost like he's kind of an afterthought. It's like
That's
sometimes directors like won't think about the music until they get to that point, and then that's when they start looking around for somebody.
Music is so important to the film.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh man.
Yeah, it is. I feel so left out sometimes. No.
Yeah. Oh man.
But really, I mean, music is like one of the last things that gets done, and it usually gets done when the color grade is going on and the audio edit's going on, because all I need as a composer is like a locked visual edit with enough audio that I understand what's going on. So typically those like color grade, audio, music, all those things are going on at the same time. Music typically gets done last. And that's, I mean, it's just kind of the nature of it. But no, I'm usually never very involved until it's actually time to sit down and write the music. And then typically I'll do a spotting session with typically the director, because they know the film, the cut of the film and the script and all that the best, and we'll talk it through and kind of call the cues, like where we want the music to be, what kind of music are we thinking here, and we kind of work that out together. Most of the time. Sometimes they just give it to me and say, do your thing, and
wow,
I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Because I have like basically full creative control over the music. And sometimes that's nice. Sometimes, though, it's nice to get input from the director. So again, like every project is different. Like if I know exactly where this needs to go, I'm good. If I'm a little fuzzy on it, then input from the director is really really beneficial. And I either they need to give me you do your thing and we'll be cool with it. Maybe some revisions here and there, or I need to know exactly what they want to hear. If it's in between and they don't really know and they kind of want you to come up with it and then they don't like it, it's like a constant battle back and forth. So it kind of really needs to be one or the other.
Now, I don't know how much time we want to spend talking about this, because this is like a controversial topic, but how do you feel about temp tracks? Is that something that's like at all helpful for you? Or if the director's like, hey, something like this, or is it mostly just really frustrating?
If the director knows what they want to hear and they give me a temp track and they say, this is what we want it to sound like, not exactly like this, but in this neighborhood, that is fine. If they give it to you and they go, or if they give you 3 different genres of temp music and they say, we want all the sound of all 3 of these together, and then you try that and then it's like, oh, that sounds too much like this one, or that's not even close. That is a little bit more difficult. I prefer to not have temp tracks. I mean, maybe if they say, look, they send me to a certain soundtrack and they say, look, we kind of want it to sound like this soundtrack, or we want it to sound like this composer, or the music from this movie. That's fine. When they start dropping it in, it gets a little confusing for the composer, because you don't know how closely they want you to match that. So you have to be careful, because you don't want to infringe on copyright, especially. But you kind of want to do something original. So it's difficult, because they hired you to write something original, and then they give you a bunch of these different ideas. Sometimes they all sound the same, and sometimes it's all totally different. And that's where it's like, okay, I really need you need to tell me it needs to sound like this, or I'll do something original and we'll work through that. So to answer your question, that was a little more in depth than you're probably wanting, but I am not a fan of temp tracks in general, but I can work with them, and we'll get it done either way.
It's more helpful if the director sends you like, here's a whole soundtrack, or here's like broadly kind of the sound that we're going for, but then you can like go in and make the specifics original. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. As long as they don't get super specific about certain tracks being, we want it to sound exactly like this music from this movie right here in our scene. That's when
they've already cut the scene to the timing difficult. Of that track.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So but if they say, look, general this area, general direction, we want it to sound somewhat like this. That's cool.
Cool. That's awesome. Nice. Well, I think we're going to take a quick commercial break. But when we come back, I have some more questions for you about like specifics of your process, and then a couple fun questions that we'll ask as well at the end. So we'll be right back.
Well, that was a great commercial. So we're
my
still
favorite
talking
commercial
to Conner.
ever.
Favorite commercial ever.
Yes, I fully support whatever was just advertised.
I have no idea what it is.
No idea what it was.
No, I think it's that one Anchor podcast one.
Yeah,
isn't it?
if you're listening to this, it's the one that I recorded a long time ago, the Anchor. But if you're watching it on YouTube, who knows what it was?
We don't really know. It could be a Dove commercial. Good sanitation, I guess.
Yep.
Okay, anyways. I kind of wanted to bring up the point about talking with your director, but you kind of like already touched on this as far as like, I don't want to talk about temp tracks that much. Or I don't want like too specific, or I don't want like crazy broad, or you do want a lot of freedom. You don't want crazy specific. What are some things, because I'm actually like kind of talking... currently I'm like kind of dealing with this, like, how do you talk to your composer? Similarly, kind of the question, like, how do you talk to your editor? And we talked about this when we were doing documentary editing, like, how do you talk to your documentary editor? Because like, it's kind of like you're building part of the story. It's like, how do you communicate that? But like, it's not really a tangible thing you can put your finger on. It's not like, oh, put that beat there. And like, well, I guess you could speak in beats and like story progression, but yeah, like colors, like how weird and out there do you go with like, oh, it needs to feel like this color, or just like, okay, this beat needs to feel like super, super long, intense. Like, what kind of things are helpful for you communication wise?
Yeah, it's kind of, it depends on who you're working with and if you trust them to catch the vision of your film. If you feel like they do, then, and you like their work, you like their music overall, then I would say give them as much freedom as possible. If you trust that they're gonna deliver on what you want to hear, and it's gonna maybe exceed your expectations. If you don't really know, and that also applies to if you don't really know what you want. It's kind of helpful to say, okay, I don't really know what I want. Take a listen, or watch this and see what you think, or just start doing your thing, and then we'll go from there. If you know what you want to hear, like you've been over this film 1,000 times and you know the type of music you want to hear, it's more helpful to say, like, okay, this is like a genre, a specific genre of music that you want to hear, and because most of the time, if a composer kind of they can pick up on emotion, that's kind of their job, is to ascertain and then bring out the emotion of the film, so they know typically what's going on. What's more helpful from the director is, unless the director has a very specific idea, like I don't want to do traditional, I want to do something totally weird, something totally different, then yeah, that needs to be communicated as effectively as possible, because a composer is typically going to go with what they're feeling, and a lot of times that can be fairly traditional just because it works. If you want to go outside the box, because a composer, they don't want to get too carried away if they think that the director is not gonna like it. Like if they try and think too far outside the box, there's a danger of totally blowing it. So yeah, if you want to hear something completely different, and you know that, then by all means communicate that and say, okay, think outside the box. Like we're doing something totally different here. If it's very traditional, again, like a composer, that's kind of their job, is they know that's what they do, and to get something different, they need that freedom to think outside the box. So it's such a it really is. I mean, it's a collaboration between director and composer most often, unless the director just dumps it in your lap and says, "Here you go, do whatever you want with it." Just constant communication and like sharing even cue by cue and making sure that you're both on the same page. I think that's really helpful, especially up front, is to make sure you're on the same page about kind of what you want to hear. And the composer can write some ideas and send those over initially, and that's where it kind of helps to be involved early, because the composer can start working on just like mock-up ideas, like here's just with a couple instruments, like here's a theme idea, here's something for this scene, do you like this, and start throwing ideas out there. Whereas if you have you don't have as much time to do that and you have to do it quickly, you might totally miss it because you weren't working with the director initially and trying to get their feel for it. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I either, again, I like to have either I want the director to give me the direction, like tell me where you want this to go, or let me figure it out and see if you like it.
Yeah, I have a director friend, Catherine. We've had her on the podcast before.
Yeah.
And she's talked to me before about when she's talking to a composer, the first conversation that she always has with them is not where music is going to go, but where she wants there to be silence. So I think that's kind of what you're saying about just like getting the big dramatic beats and like, here's the main like big highlights, and then kind of let the composer go in and do their thing. But I just thought that was like a really interesting perspective that she had, where it's like first you talk about where there's no music and then you figure out what to do with the music where it needs to be.
That's really cool.
Right. Yeah. And that is almost half of it is knowing where to use silence and not have music at all. And that's because that can be really powerful too. So that is a big part too. And typically the danger is writing too much music. Like I'm really good at writing too much music because I can see music almost under everything. And it's kind of a problem because there doesn't need to be music under everything. And so that's like knowing when to back off too is really key. But yeah, it really helps to have to go over the whole film with the director. Like if I in a perfect world, if I could sit down with the director and we start the film from beginning to end and we just talk it through and write down notes and figure out what they're thinking and what I'm thinking and collaborate that way. I think typically you tend to have a little bit better product in the end because you're both on the same page and you've worked all that through.
That's cool. So I had kind of like a random, I guess, fun-ish question. Do you have like a favorite movie soundtrack that's just like your personal all-time favorite?
I get asked that question all the time, and I always have to think about it. There's so many that are so good. I really love Apollo 13, and Braveheart. Those are some of my favorite, and both of them by James Horner. Just amazing music. But I'll go back and forth on like sometimes every time I'm asked, I usually have a different answer.
Yeah.
I love some old classic scores too.
Nice. So, and then sort of like along those lines, is there a favorite genre that you like to work in, or maybe a genre that you haven't gotten to do yet that you hope to do someday?
Good question. I don't necessarily have a favorite genre. I mean, I love orchestra. I love jazz, and I like trying to mix the two of those together. I don't get the opportunity to do that very often. But I'm a big classic movie buff, so I love that old, jazzy type sounding music. So I wish I had the opportunity to do a little bit more of that. But I love trying new stuff all the time. So every time I get an opportunity to try a new genre, it's like, it's happy time.
Yeah.
But I love trying to perfect orchestra and make that better and better and try new ideas with that and try mixing other genres in with it. Because sometimes, I mean, that's like having a hybrid score of you got your bass orchestra, but then you've got this other funky genre going along with it, depending on the story. That's a lot of fun.
And then you mentioned earlier about like live instruments. Do you ever, especially if you're gonna mix it with the orchestra, do you ever like, okay, so we got a solo guitar piece. Do you ever just take it out and record it yourself and use that, or is that more for just you practicing, or is like a practice you like to use for like actual film scores?
I have from time to time. I've recorded some solo violin parts, and it kind of depends on the needs. I've done work where instruments were required in the story. I just did an audio drama show where we had a violin and a harmonica played by characters in the story. So I had
Nice.
to come up with ways to do that. I actually I recorded the harmonica live. I didn't do the violin live. But from time to time, yeah, because the samples that we use, you can only do so much with them. That what you got is what you got. There's sometimes a need to record something live because you want a certain sound out of that instrument that you don't have in your digital libraries. So I do find the need to do that from time to time, and it adds a little bit of realism to your score as well to have some live instruments in there. So I do it as much as, especially if I have time, because it's time consuming to get that set up and make sure I have a player that knows how to play the instrument well and can do that. I do it from time to time myself if I know how to play the instrument. But it's a time consuming part. So if I have time to do it, it's a great thing to do to add realism to the score.
I kind of wanted to dive in a little bit more as well to the like the technical like details of when you're doing digital music. So I know you said you use Logic, but could you talk a little bit about like what your setup is in terms of like what speakers you have and what MIDI controller you have, and like are there plugins that you're using? Like what is your what is your setup, and then also what would you recommend for someone who's like just wanting to get started and learn how to do it? What does their setup need to be?
Yeah, good questions. I use Logic and Apple Computer, and that's really like having to start with having a decent computer that can handle what you're trying to do is really important, because the samples that we use are so CPU intensive that it can really overload your system very quickly. It's much like video editing. You gotta you gotta have a decent machine. You can get away with doing it on a laptop, but you can only go so far with a smaller setup. So I'm constantly trying to expand my setup and get better computers and better software and all that. But base computer, something that can handle what you're doing, something like with at least 16 gigabytes of RAM and a good solid processor. That's really key. External hard drives. That's another big thing. I use I have two 4 terabyte SSD hard drives that are completely separate from my computer. They're connected via Thunderbolt, so it's super fast. And that's really key because I put my project, the Logic project, on one drive and the samples on another drive, and so everything, and then the computer is not overloaded by everything you're trying to do. It's spread out across multiple hard drives, and that's really key to your workflow, because if you try to put everything on one hard drive in one computer, and you don't have a lot of CPU room, you're gonna run out of, you're gonna overload it really fast and not be able to do anything. So that's really important. I use a lot of East-West sound libraries, which are just libraries of instruments that have been recorded live, and then they're packaged into a library. And East-West has their own software. There's another software company out there called Contact, and a lot of libraries recorded by different companies use Contact as their engine, which powers the samples and streams the samples that we use. So there's a couple of different engines out there, or plugins out there, that support the samples that a ton of different companies produce. So I love East West. I love a lot of Native Instruments libraries. Project Sam, Berlin. If you're a composer and you're listening to this, you probably know what I'm talking about. And if not, these are great things to go look up and just start figuring out.
Yeah.
What's out there. But those are like all of those I just listed are kind of my favorites in when it comes to libraries. And again, you got to have plenty of storage for all the because those libraries are huge. They take a ton of storage and just a ton of CPU. So that's half of it is having a good computer hard drive setup to support and power what you're doing on the musical side because you will lose your creativity and if you're constantly having to fight your computer, you're just not going to get anything done, and it's going to be difficult to make anything sound good. So I've had to learn that the hard way so many times, and so I've tried over the years to equally invest in different things, and computers, software, speakers. I've got JBL. I don't remember exactly what they are. I think they're. I don't remember the model, but they're JBL speakers, and I mean there's a ton of good speakers out there. But you want to have a decent set of either speakers or headphones to monitor what you're doing, one or the other. I mixed on headphones for a long time because I didn't really have a decent pair of speakers, and then I got speakers. Now I almost mix totally on speakers. But you can do either one. I like headphones because you kind of get a little bit more into it, and you can hear some details better, and it feels like you're more involved in your music and your orchestra. So I go back and forth a lot of the time. But I mean that's really the base is good piece of software, decent computer. Again, you can do it on a laptop to get started. Buy one library. There's a great library out there called East West Symphonic Orchestra. It's produced by East West. It's soundsonline.com. And they make just this a packaged orchestra, and there's a lot of companies that do it. I started with that, and it gives you kind of everything you need to get started with some decent sounds. But check out some of the other companies that make packaged orchestra libraries because they give you a whole orchestra, pretty much everything you need to get going. And then as you start investing in more, you'll start buying different libraries, like just a string library or just a brass library or guitars or solo instruments. There's a ton of stuff out there. But start with a package that you can afford that gives you what you need to get going. You can do it on a laptop and a keyboard. Obviously, you need a good digital keyboard, MIDI keyboard, and a piece of software and a library. And that's a great place to start.
Yeah, that's cool.
Wow.
Yeah, I like how you said just find a package you can afford because I feel like there are so many options out there, and like there's probably always to a degree a better option out there, but it's like just start where you are, and then as you go, like you said, you'll get better and get a better library and everything.
Right.
That's really great.
Do what you can afford,
Don't let that
and
hold you
equally
back.
invest in everything as you can afford it. And you'll just slowly build up what you need over time.
Yeah, it's really great. Yeah,
I feel like in a lot of different fields, they say, it's not about what you have, it's how you use it. Would you say that's kind of similar? I mean, I feel like there's a limit to that because it's like, if this is a crappy violin, it's a crappy violin and there's no fixing it. Because
exactly.
I'm like, I know that's from the keyboard and I hate that. But I mean, would you say that principle generally still applies? It's like just how you do your music.
Yeah, it really does because you got the writing music side of it, and then you've got the mixing side, and you can do a lot on the mixing side to fix issues you have on the recording side. So it is true that I mean if you have something to work with, you can make it work. The better your sample sound, and the better you become, the better your music will begin to sound. But it is true to learn to kind of break into it, to just get going. I mean get what you can afford, and then work with that, and as you afford more, invest in better hardware and software. And your music will gradually sound better. I mean, it's not going to sound great if you're just starting out. It ain't going to sound great. I've got so much from my first days of doing that I'm like, oh man, this is so bad, but it's still fun to listen to because I can compare it to what I do now, and probably 6 months to a year from now, I'm going to do the same thing to what I write now. It's a constant learning process, and you'll never know everything. I'm never going to be the best, and I will always consider myself a student, and there's evidence of that by going back and listening to what you did when you started or even a year ago. You'll notice a difference.
That's such a great attitude to have, to just always be learning. Like, no matter what you do, just keep learning.
Exactly. And stick with it, stay in there, because you'll get better. And it's part of, there's days where I don't want to do this. I have absolutely no passion for this. I can't think of anything, but I got to try. And I probably won't get much done that day. But if you don't stick with it, then you're never going to see results. And when you see results, that's when you can take satisfaction in all that toil.
Yeah, that's really great. And I know I'm sure there's a lot more that we could talk about with this, but I feel like we do need, I think, to start wrapping it up for the sake of time. And I think that's a great place to end it. So thank you for being here, Conner. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your insight with us. I feel like, this has been really encouraging. I feel like even for someone who's not necessarily into composing, it's been very encouraging. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I was thrilled to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. We did want to give you just an opportunity to just promote yourself a little bit as well. So I don't know if you have like a website or a social media page where people can find your work, or if maybe there's a film you worked on recently that's coming out. But just wanted to give you the floor and anything you want to promote.
Sure. Thank you. I do have a website. It's connersavoca.com. Real easy.
Nice.
And I got it's kind of under construction. I'm planning to update it soon, but I've been busy writing music, so
good excuse.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been doing my job.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have time to advertise. So I have that and tons of music samples on there, and a little bit about me and contact information and all that. I got some movies out there on a couple of them are on Amazon Prime. I just finished a feature film over the winter. Last I heard was going to be on the Hallmark Channel. Don't know if that ever happened, but
nice.
So there's some stuff out there.
Awesome.
Most of that's on my website if you're interested in. I have a one soundtrack out there, Sir Kendrick of Penwell.
I was just listening to it this last week. It was so good.
It was a fun project. It's actually one of my favorites, and it's been 3 or 4 years since we did that. So I have a couple other soundtracks that are going to be coming out this year from films that I did recently. But all that's on my website. So if you're interested in listening to it or talking to me about a project, then I'm here, and I'd love to talk to you, and I hope you enjoy my music.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, everyone go support Conner.
Click that link, drop subscribe, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
You're just going to get so many messages. Hi! They're just all music. They're just going to be all
I won't be able to answer. I'm sorry, I'm writing music. I can't talk.
Yeah. Oh man, that's funny. Well, thank you again for taking time to be here. I did want to mention before we go, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but this is our 50th episode.
Oh,
so
wow!
It's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big milestone.
Wow, I am honored. Thank you. I made it.
So you are honored guest at this 50th episode.
The gold 50th edition. Wow.
One might say the honored guest.
And also just wanted to say thank you to like all our listeners who have been listening to us just for 50 episodes. It's so crazy. I don't know.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
That's quite a milestone. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was thrilled to be on for the 50th. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll have to have you on for the 100th episode as well.
That would be great.
Like,
I'd love to.
Every time.
Yes, we should make that happen.
The special edition episodes.
Christmas special.
That's great.
Wow. Well, but yes, thank you to
everyone who
everybody.
listened and watched. Thanks again, Connor, for taking time to talk to us today. And until next time.
Thank you.
We'll see you on set.
Yes! We
yep,
did
there
it!
we go. We did it. We nailed it.
Nailed it.